Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Bryan Enslein, co-founder of Global Build Collaborative. Bryan, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Within the past couple of months, the U.S. Agency for International Development has really been in President Trump and the Trump administration's crosshairs. The State Department announced last week that they are going through with plans to essentially dissolve the agency and then reorganize parts of it to the State Department. To start off the conversation, I know you have worked with USAID. Can you talk to us about that partnership, what that work looked like?
Sure. Global Build Collaborative is a veteran-owned engineering firm. We plan, manage, oversee construction programs. We have projects, water projects in Ethiopia, road projects in Bangladesh. We work with national parks in Uganda. We work with municipalities in Ecuador, and we oversee USAID general construction in DRC. At least we used to. Our role is to make sure that projects are done safely, that they're done efficiently, and that they are built to last. We typically focus on small-scale rural construction that supports a larger project. An example might be a construction of a tuberculosis ward in DRC that is larger, as part of a larger health project.
Can you talk about just how long you've been working with USAID? Has this work been since President Trump's first term? Talk to us about that experience.
Sure. Prior to starting GBC, I was a foreign service officer with USAID. I worked there for 8 years. I left in 2018 and then started GBC in 2019. During the first Trump administration, there was an effort that I think was done well to combat China's encroachment in Africa, Asia, and South America. It takes a long time for these projects to develop. So most of the programs that we were working on were developed under that mindset, which I thought was a well-focused approach. What's wild now is that when you hear about these projects being canceled, the Chinese are actually taking over the projects some of the projects that were developed during that time.
That's really interesting. And I think that could be one of those unintended consequences that people are seeing with the shuttering of USAID. When you hear that China is taking over these projects that the United States started, what's your reaction?
So I've heard about projects in Cambodia. I've heard about projects in Nepal. I've heard about projects in Colombia where the Chinese are working with the local counterparts, working with local businesses to complete projects that USAID started. So, for example, there's, I think, a project in Nepal where there was either schools or some types of buildings that were being built. It was almost completed, and then once the projects were terminated, there was no more work being done that was funded by USAID. The Chinese then basically paid for these projects to be completed and then put their own stickers and signs up on the project. So suddenly you have schools that were primarily built by USAID that are then suddenly being claimed by China. If you're saying that USAID's funding fraud is wasteful, if projects are not worthwhile, it's why then would China be so happy to take these projects over and be paying for them themselves?
And what do you think about that argument that the USAID, that's getting cut because we're finding waste, fraud, and abuse in that? Is that the case? Because you have been working on these projects since President Trump's first term. So under that guise, wouldn't it be waste, fraud, and abuse then too?
So I don't think I realized before I started working with USAID how the government works, really, and especially how USAID works. So when we work with USAID, we have to report up to a technical program officer. So they're the ones that, it's called a COR, they're the ones that actually oversee what is going on with the project as far as the details are concerned. We then have to report also to a contracting officer to make sure we follow contracts. We then also have to provide invoices to a finance officer to make sure that our invoices are done correctly. We then submit reports that are weekly, monthly, quarterly reports to make sure that everything we're doing is done correctly. I think that USAID, they really make sure that we are spending the U.S. government's money correctly. If you don't like what USAID is spending money on, you need to talk to Congress because they're the ones that tell USAID how to spend their money. It's Congress who then instructs USAID saying, this is what you need to be doing, and USAID is the one that actually does it.
And now USAID is getting shuttered. This is what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, quote, "Thanks to President Trump, this misguided and fiscally irresponsible era is now over. We are reorienting our foreign assistance programs to align directly with what is best for the United States and our citizens." What's your reaction to how he characterized USAID compared to your experience, and what's your reaction to the news overall?
So I think the State Department does a good job with collecting information, with conducting diplomacy internationally. I think, like any government department, there can be improvements made with the State Department, like there could have been improvements made with USAID. The State Department doesn't run programs. They don't have people who are technical that can say how to install a well. They don't have people who are technical who can say how to provide foodstuff to people during famine. And so I think by firing everyone at USAID, you're losing a lot of wisdom. You're losing a lot of expertise that you're going to have to rehire. I'm not sure if the State Department can handle contracts that USAID has. I think the equivalent would be like if you ask Google to start making cars. I'm sure one day Google can start making cars, but you're going to have to hire people from the car companies to start doing it.
I spoke with a CEO of a small business earlier this week. His name's Keith Ives, and he essentially said, "I don't know by June 1st if I'm going to have a business anymore. With USAID shuttering, they've completely cut most of my contracts out. It's like essentially doing surgery with an axe." What is the impact this is going to have on your business?
We had 4 contracts cut as of, I think it was March 1st. There was a memo that went to Congress that had a list of active contracts. This is after Marco Rubio said that 83% of contracts have been terminated and that all the terminations have been finalized. The memo then went to Congress that had a list of the active projects and a list of the terminated projects. We had one project that was on the list of active projects. Unfortunately, the next day, that project was then terminated as well. So as of right now, we have no revenue source. We had to, unfortunately, terminate all our subcontracts. We had to let go of our workers, all of our employees, some of which have been here with us for almost 5 years. It's been a rough couple months. As far as opportunities, our expertise is construction with the federal government. We don't know what opportunities there are going to be in the next 3 months. We don't know what opportunities there are going to be in the next 6 months, but how much turbulence there's been. I'm not sure if we'll be here in July as well. So it's been rough going so far. It's going to be even more difficult to try to reestablish what we created over the last 5 years.
I think what's missing then from the national conversation, from the international conversation, really is what you're saying is that how around the world, how the globe looks at America through the lens of USAID. Can you touch on that?
Sure. I think when USAID does its job properly, you don't hear about it in America. I think the best way you can look at USAID is a bet on the future. It's a small amount of money. Well, I'm sorry, it's not a small amount of money. It's a lot of money, but it's small compared to the consequences. For example, USAID might put $1 million towards building schools in Lebanon. And that is to combat Hezbollah building schools in Lebanon and Hezbollah then having their influence on students. In Liberia, you might say it's a bet that building clinics and training doctors will help us identify the next Ebola outbreak. And that is better identified in Liberia, I think, than in the shores of America. In the DRC, we are working to build some roads and improve the private sector. And so that's a way for U.S. companies to then get resources out of the DRC and improve American lives. And so I think those are all things that it's worth spending money on a bet for the USAID than having the consequences that might cost trillions of dollars in wars and famines and disease outbreaks.
I think something that really stuck out to me at the beginning of this conversation is you saying that USAID came in, they almost finished these projects for years, they funded these projects. Then with these cuts, you see China now coming in, China slapping their stickers on these projects, claiming them as their own. What are some of the long-term and possibly permanent impacts you think that we're going to see because USAID is shutting down?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to predict. I think I spent a year in Afghanistan with USAID. And when you were there, you had multiple countries from around the world supporting U.S. efforts. They were supporting it with troops, they were supporting it with money, they were supporting it with resources. In the future, I don't know where we're going to need support, but I am afraid that we may not get the support that we once did.
Bryan, I really appreciate your conversation today. I really appreciate you coming on and joining me. And as we see, the fallout of these cuts, I hope you come back on and we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.